This past September was 8 years since I first moved abroad, and I haven't looked back since, really. 2010, I packed up a backpack, a suitcase? I think it was a suitcase that I bought a backpack. And I moved to New Zealand with $2,500, as you may have seen in a previous video. The story really begins in 2008. So I studied abroad in my third year of college. I went to Switzerland. It was amazing. It was, quote unquote a life-changing experience, but it really was. I met Luke. Luke is from the UK, so it was definitely a struggle at first. We kind of didn't admit it to ourselves, like how quickly things kept happening, and after 5 months in Switzerland, I had to go back and finish my degree while Luke stayed on in Switzerland for another 6 months. We did long distance for 1.5 years. It was really hard. It was like some of the toughest times that I've had while in college and trying to finish up my degree and try and live, and enjoy the last couple of months of college. And yeah, in 2009, Christmas 2009, Luke and I made the decision that probably changed the whole course of my life. Not to sound so dramatic. But we decided that in order to be together after we graduated, that we would move to New Zealand. I don't exactly remember why New Zealand came up as our choice, but I think we just wanted to be like as far away as we could. We thought like start really far and we can work our way back. The funny thing is, when we packed up our suitcases in 2010 and went to New Zealand, we were really only meant to be away for a year. So we were gonna go to New Zealand on a working holiday visa, which is what we did. We were gonna spend 6 months working in New Zealand, saving up a ton of money because we didn't have a ton of money. And we were gonna quit our jobs and travel New Zealand and travel Australia and travel Southeast Asia, which is hilarious. If you've ever been to New Zealand or Australia, you know how expensive it is. So pretty much as soon as we got to New Zealand, we realized that wasn't gonna happen. We fell in love with the country. We moved to Christchurch, and we absolutely loved it. We created this wonderful community of other travelers. We felt like we knew everything, and we were living the good life, like any good 23-year-old who is across the world for the first time. And we stayed in Christchurch until they had a pretty big earthquake. And yeah, that was pretty scary, and we decided that it was time to move on from Christchurch. So after being there for about 8 months, we packed up our station wagon and we kitted it out like a camper van, and we traveled New Zealand for about 5 months on and off, doing some woofing and some volunteer work to try and keep costs down. We stayed in hostels when we were tired of staying in the backseat of our car, and we camped like for free almost every night. It was amazing. It was a true like backpacker broke student trip, and it was amazing. And we look back at it now and we laugh. We could never do that now. But at the time, it brought us really close together. It made us realize how much we love being on the road, and it made us realize that we were not ready to go back to a normal life and get jobs. And yeah, so we got another working holiday in Australia. We moved to Australia. Again, we had hardly any money, especially when we transferred our New Zealand dollars into Aussie dollars, but we figured it would work out just the way that it had worked out in New Zealand. We moved to Melbourne. It was just before Christmas 2011. Luckily, because it was just before Christmas, I was able to get a job in retail. I'd worked in retail all through college, so we had just enough to kind of pay rent, eat, and like do a lot of free sightseeing in Melbourne. Thankfully, there's a lot of free stuff to do in Melbourne. Just before Christmas, we moved to Sydney, and I mean, the story could have stopped there. We fell in love with Sydney. We had jobs that we enjoyed. Luke more than me, but the city was enough. I loved being near the coast. I loved the harbor. I loved all the beaches. I loved the lifestyle, the cafe culture, the amazing coffee, the great brunch foods. Like, it was just a happening city, and I'd never lived in a place that was so cool before. We maxed out our visa situation after 2 years. We spent 2 years living in Sydney, traveling around Australia, exploring South Australia, Victoria, the Northern Territory, Darwin, the Uluru, the East Coast from Brisbane back down again, and it was some of the best traveling that I've experienced. I learned that I should not travel with a bag that is larger than me. I significantly cut down my packing abilities after that trip, and we went home for the first time in 3 years. At the end of 2013, we spent Christmas with our families, and we met nieces and nephews that had been born while we were gone, and we saw friends get married, and it was great, but we weren't there permanently, and we knew it. We started applying for teaching jobs in Asia, and just before summer of 2014, we moved to South Korea for a year to teach English, and it was the best and worst year of my life. I loved Korea, I loved the food, I loved the people, I loved being in a culture that was so different to anything I'd ever experienced. It really made me realize that, you know, there is a whole world out there of places and countries and cultures that I have yet to even know about, never mind come to understand in any sort of comprehensive way. We spent a year living in a suburb of Seoul, and we spent weekends in Seoul and hiking in other parts of the country, and we took fast trains to random cities, and we ate amazing food, and I loved it, and I also hated it, because I realized that this thing that I thought I could do for years and years and years, teaching English around the world to fund my travels, wasn't for me. It wasn't for me because I'm not a teacher. I'm in no way qualified to be a teacher, and that was abundantly clear when I found myself in that situation. I don't have the patience. Children deserve so much better than what I can give them. I love kids, and I loved my students, but I wasn't giving them the best situation, and I didn't like the school system, and I didn't like the cram mentality and the kids studying until 10 p.m. It didn't sit right with me, and it made me realize that I needed to figure out what the hell I wanted to do with my life. So I spent a lot of time thinking, I spent a lot of time journaling, and just trying to figure out what it was that I really loved, and the thing that I came back to again and again and again was writing. If you had asked me in high school what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be, Ernest Hemingway, like in some ways, not others. I wanted to be a writer, and it's something that I've come back to again and again during my time in New Zealand and Australia. Whenever I'm traveling, I love to journal. I love to help other people figure out how they can sort of do what I've been doing, and that's where I am now. I left Korea in 2015. I traveled Southeast Asia for 6 months, a couple of weeks in Japan, a couple of weeks in Taiwan, the Philippines, a month in Vietnam, a month in Cambodia, a month in Laos, and a month in Thailand. And then I went home again to see my family, and with no idea really what we were going to do next, we had to figure it out. So I started my blog, and it failed, and I started another blog, and that's Eternal Expat. And I moved to Mexico, and I fell in love with Mexico City, and I fell in love with this country and trying to learn another language and another culture and more amazing food and more really cool people, and I know that's not the end of my story. I know I talk about Mexico City and how much I love it, and I don't have plans to leave anytime soon, but it's not forever, and I look forward to the adventures that come next, because I never would have thought that I would be here living in Mexico. So what an exciting prospect of where I never thought I might live next. So thank you for following along with my journey, and I hope that you guys find these videos helpful. I hope that you find them inspiring. I hope that if you're thinking of doing something like this, you realize through this quite long story that I'm just a normal person who started traveling and didn't stop and figured out ways to keep going, and I never had very much money. Still don't really have that much money, and I'm so happy. I couldn't be happier. I've never been happier in my job, in my home, in my day-to-day life. I get up every day and I'm so look forward to what's gonna happen, whether it's a day out in Mexico City or traveling around the country somewhere, or sitting down here on my couch and writing my blog or talking to you on YouTube. So thanks guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.